Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another video. Today's session is going to focus on Ford 6R80 valve body and or control body complex assembly. So this particular unit is out of a 2016 Ford F-150 4x4, and today we're going to walk you through all the different, subcomponents within the valve body. So I'll give you an overview of the valve trains, their respective layout, then we'll put the valve body back together, go over to the Sonic's vac test machine and test the valve body to determine if there's any kind of weaknesses or faults or anything that would concern us. And then from there, we'll bring you back, have the two valve body halves assembled, where I will then discuss the variable force solenoid complex. There's 7 of them in total, and we'll relay some important information you need to know about those. I'll show you how to continuity test them, and then from there we'll kind of close with the spacer plate and lead frame, and I'll again share some information that's pertinent to those two things that you need to know, assuming you're not already familiar with these transmissions. We are going to be installing a Sonic zip kit into this unit. I use the zip kit for pretty much every 6R that I build, every 6L and every ZF, or basically every one of these transmissions where Sonic makes such a kit. Transgo makes a reprogramming kit. I've not used it. I'm sure it's perfectly fine. I've just always gravitated toward the Sonic stuff, but if you wanted to run the Transgo stuff, that's perfectly fine. Either or, as long as you do something, because these valve bodies are prone to wear, especially at places like bore plugs, and there's certain valves that are problematic to an extent. So you want to deal with that with a correction kit like the zip kit or the Transgo equivalent. So alright, let me go ahead and move the camera a little bit closer. We'll run through the valve trains real quick. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to show the film of me reassembling the valve body. For the most part, nobody watches those kinds of videos, and I understand why. I mean, it's common sense, really. All you're doing is, taking the valves out and laying them out in the order in which they came out of the bore, and then after you clean everything up, you just simply put them back in that same order, in that same bore. It's kind of like watching grass grow or paint dry, I suppose. So these valve body videos will focus more on the what, as opposed to the how or the how-to. And the what is a lot more important, because you need to know what to do when you have one of these units come in, or if you're rebuilding your own with respect to the valve bodies. You need to know what to test, and to some extent how to test it, but I mean the method is the same. It's just simply Sonic's vac test machine. But you need to know what needs to be replaced, what areas you need to focus on, and what kind of drivability symptoms you'll have based on impairment in the valve body complex, the solenoids, or the lead frame, because there's a whole laundry list of problems that have their causes within this broader control body complex. So lead frame is subject to numerous recalls and TSBs. The solenoids can either stop working altogether or start to fail intermittently. And then of course you have wear in the mechanical portion of the assembly itself. So for example, these accumulators, they like to wear. Well, specifically it's the little dampers that will wear, and that will mess with the timing of apply and release of your different clutches, so your gear transitions will be a little bumpy or jerky. So those are the things that you need to be aware of and have kind of top of mind when you're going through one of these valve bodies. So that's what the video will focus on, not necessarily the procedure of taking it apart or putting it back together. I mean, obviously it's already apart, but I didn't film the disassembly, so there's not going to be a disassembly video. Alright, let's go ahead and walk through the valve trains, and then from there I'm going to put everything back together, and then we'll jump over to the Sonic station and test everything. Alright, we got you a little closer, and as you can see I have some cheat sheet strips here with the names of each valve train and each valve, so I can go through it without fumbling over myself too bad or forgetting which valve is called what. I'll make a blanket statement first, in that any weakness, any sealing integrity issues in any one of these valves will show up as drivability symptoms from the point of view of the driver. So, listing every single symptom associated with each one of these valves is probably not practical. Just the main thing to know is that if there is impairment, okay, if there are problems in any one of these valve trains, either in the lower valve body or the upper valve body or the accumulators or anything else, solenoids, etc., you're going to have problems. So that's why it's very important to comprehensively test this entire valve body assembly. So that's what we're going to do, in a little bit once all this is back together. So anyway, we'll start with the lower valve body, and everything on this side here is going to be relative to this location here, starting with the manual valve. Okay, so you have the manual valve itself, obviously, and then you're going to have your lube control valve, that's this valve here, your converter relief regulator valve, your main pressure regulator valve and sleeve, your bypass clutch control regulator valve, your overdrive clutch latch valve, your overdrive clutch regulator valve, and your forward clutch boost valve and sleeve and regulator valve. And of course, you have all your respective springs. One thing to note, if you have the ATSG manual, at least the copy that I have that I downloaded from their website, they mislabel the forward boost valve. They call this the bore plug, and also this. They call this the forward pressure regulator valve, as well as this. So just know that this is the boost valve and the sleeve. And the zip kit comes with a new valve and sleeve kit, so this will not be going back in. Alright, starting from the solenoid side of the lower valve body, you have the forward clutch latch valve, the direct clutch latch valve, that's these two valves here respectively. And then you have, go over here, your basically, it's called your solenoid deregulator valve, your low reverse brake latch valve, your drive enable valve, and your solenoid multiplex valve. So this solenoid regulator valve here is the equivalent of the actuator feed limit valve in GM transmissions. GM has a different nomenclature, but that valve and this valve perform the same function. So real quick, I'll point out the orientation of these retainers. So for the two latch valves, forward and direct, it goes back in like this with the hook facing inboard. And then for the, I guess, roughly triangular shaped retainers, okay, the folded side is going to face up with the valve body casting upside down. With the worm tracks facing you, this is going to face up. This will face down. So again, the Sonic Zip Kit comes with replacements for every single one of these bore plugs because they can occasionally leak and they'll have weakness. What we're going to do is I'm going to assemble this whole valve body as it is. I'm not going to put any Sonic stuff in there right away. All I'm going to do, because I want to see a baseline, I want to get a baseline of the condition and health of this valve body before improvement. It's really next to no work to take the stock plugs out and then reinstall the Sonic's plugs. And same with this thing, and I mean, there's really not much to do. So it's worth spending a little bit of extra time to get that baseline, at least in my opinion. Alright, I think you have a good view of the upper valve body, so we'll start with the accumulators. So here you have your 6 accumulators and their respective dampers. These dampers will like to wear over time, causing clutch apply and release timing issues, and consequently drivability symptoms. Usually they show up as kind of jerky, bumpy, clunky upshifts and downshifts. So if you're experiencing those kinds of things, this would probably be the first place I'd look, to be honest. Alright, you have your 8 check balls, and I'll flash a diagram on the screen to show you exactly where they all go. And then you're going to have your clutch exhaust and your converter drain back valve and springs. And then you're going to have 2 filter screens. The small one's for direct clutch, and then your larger one is going to be for your main pressure regulator valve. So it's filtering signal oil to each of these respective valve trains. All right, and then for the valves themselves, we're going to start with the intermediate clutch regulator valve. That's this valve and spring right here. Your low reverse D1 regulator valve, you'll notice the absence of a spring. And then you have your low reverse D2 clutch latch valve, and then your direct clutch regulator valve. In pre-mechanical diode 6R80s, you will also have a fifth valve train, and that fifth valve train is going to be the low reverse D2 clutch regulator valve. That was eliminated starting in 2011 once they integrated the low reverse one-way diode in the back of the case. I mean, that was part of that whole massive engineering change cycle that this transmission went through. And I cover a lot of that in the teardown and inspection videos, so if you haven't watched that and you want to learn more about what those changes are and what they mean for your transmission, go ahead and check that out. Alright, so let's take a look at the Sonic Zip Kit real quick. Figure I'll show you everything that comes inside of it. So you're going to have your set of instructions. Alright, that's going to walk you through the testing procedures, and it also has some important differences, information I should say about the differences in the various iterations of these valve bodies. There's basically two generations, and in that first generation there's two vintages, so you see that here. And then your second generation is everything 2015 and up, and they are all the same for the most part. Alright, so let's reach into the box. So you have a set of solenoid O-rings. If you're going to reuse your solenoids, you can install new O-rings. I'll be honest, I wouldn't recommend using solenoids over again in an overhaul. It is not my preference. I always replace solenoids and lead frames and any other electronic part, and always use either OEM, in this case it would be Ford, or Rostra. Rostra is basically, I don't want to say it's equivalent, I don't know that for a fact, but as far as the quality and the track record that I've had with their products, it is just like OEM in that respect. Okay, so here are the new accumulators, and you notice each comes with a little damper spring, so that replaces the rubber damper plug for each one of those 6 accumulators. Alright, here is going to be your forward clutch boost valve and sleeve. Alright, we'll install that after we do the testing. Okay, this is going to be packaged exclusively for the 6R60. I'll annotate exactly what that is. I've never actually done a 6R60, so I don't know. At least not offhand. Alright, this is going to be for your pressure regulator sleeve. It replaces the stock sleeve. Okay, the stock sleeve we'll like to wear. Here's all your small solenoid bore plugs, so it replaces these dumbbell style plugs here on the variable force solenoid side of the valve body. All of these are O-ringed, so they will seal 100%. And then you have your stem style bore plugs that have O-rings themselves, and that replaces all of the stock or factory equivalents. So these are the large and these are the small. That's it. Alright, put that box aside. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble the valve body, and then next time we pick up, we'll be at the Sonic's vac testing station, and we'll go through the testing. Alright, we have both valve body castings fully assembled, and we're here at the vac test station, and we're going to put both of them through the testing process. So, a couple things before we begin. One, remember this 6R60 bag? Well, don't lose sight of it, because, and Sonic's poorly labels these things, and that's why I kind of just brushed right over it, but this bag actually contains important test parts that you need so that you can do the testing completely. So there is a plug and a spring that comes in that little bag, and the spring is going to sit between the bore plug for the solenoid regulator valve and the valve itself. And then of course you have your retainer. Now here you have your converter release regulator valve, and the bore plug that it came with is going to be used when you have the regulator valve in backwards so that you can test the outboard portion of that circuit. So you don't install the bore plug that came with it, you leave that out. You install the test plug with the retainer, the valve, and then the spring. So here are the test instructions. And you notice that here's your converter release regulator valve in the orientation it's supposed to be in when you put it back in for the final time. But then here's how they have you test the outboard portion of that circuit. Okay, and then they have the bore plug. And the little grooves, or groove I should say, faces you, or faces outboard. So we're going to install that inverted first so that we can do our testing as they as they want you to do it. And then from there, once we're all done testing everything else in here, we'll go ahead and put it in the correct way so that it's that way for the final time. Let me get my pinky. Alright, as long as it's in there, I mean, it doesn't matter which way the clip is going. So, now we can test this thing, at least for these two locations here. When we go to put it in the correct orientation, then we will test the inboardmost portion of that circuit. Alright, let me go ahead and put the solenoid regulator valve bore plug in. So, like I said, I didn't film the disassembly, and if you're not familiar with these units, you want to make sure that this folded side for your retainer faces you. And when you're taking these things apart, you want to have a finger over each one of these locations where there's a bore plug like this. Okay, so that's going to be here, 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 and here. Because otherwise, if you don't, everything's going to come flying out of the bore. I mean, it's under a lot of, all these valve trains are under a lot of spring tension. So as soon as that plug comes out, then everything else is going to want to fly across the room. So just go ahead and seat it. It's got to go all the way in. And then hold it in place so you can install your little retainer. Alright, so like I said, we're going to leave the factory plug off for now. I mean, bottom line is that factory plug is not going to actually go back on at all because we're going to use the Sonics plugs. Alright, so first things first, we need to calibrate the machine, make sure it's properly set up. If it's not, then results are never going to be accurate. So very simple deal, and I go over this in all these valve body testing videos so that we're just being thorough. You have your test fitting and your test hose. That's going to go to your test block and your gasket. Then you're going to have your two valves. You're going to have a bleeder valve and you're going to have a pump valve. That fitting has the hose that goes to your air pump. And then from there, you have your calibration receptacle, and then on the side of the machine, you have a calibration port. So first thing you're going to do is take your test lead and plug it into the calibration receptacle. Make sure it's fully seated, and then we're going to turn the machine on. And when we do, we want to see a steady 5 inches of lift right here. Now, assuming we see that, we'll go ahead and take a finger, we'll plug the calibration port on the side here, and then the needle will jump to 25 inches, or at least that's what we want to see. So we will adjust our two valves, our pump and our bleeder valve respectively, until we see 5 inches and 25 inches when that calibration port's plugged, and once we see that, we know the machine is ready to use. Okay, so it looks like we're at 5 inches. I'm going to plug the calibration port. So it looks like now we're showing steady 25 inches. When we release, we want to see a steady 5 inches. And that's what we see. So now we know we can use the machine. It's good to go. Alright, so here are the instructions. They have all the different locations that you're going to test, and there's quite a lot of them. And this lower valve body, rather, it's going to be the preponderance of the testing, and then you have some testing in your upper valve body. And then when we assemble the valve body halves together with the new separator plate, we're going to go ahead and bring this thing back over here and test all of the accumulator pistons. Now, I'm not going to test them prior to installing the Sonex parts, because that would be a complete waste of time. So we'll test them afterward. All right, so we'll first begin with, and by the way, this is where the manual valve goes. I leave it out because otherwise it just gets in the way. It's not tested. So we're going to start with the lubrication control valve, and then we'll go to the torque converter clutch regulator release valve, then the main pressure regulator valve, and then from there we have the bypass clutch control regulator valve. This is going to be the E-clutch latch, and then the E-clutch regulator valve. Sonex actually doesn't have you test the E-clutch latch other than up in here, but the E-clutch regulator valve has two test locations here, and you're going to need a screwdriver or a pick or something, because they want you to center the valve, the outboard spool centered in the, in that part of the circuit that we're testing. And then from here we're going to test the outboard spool at this location here, and this is going to be your overdrive clutch regulator valve. And then over here we have our forward clutch or A-clutch, boost valve and sleeve, and regulator valve. So we're going to test the inboard and outboard regulator valve, and then test the boost valve, inboard and outboard. Okay, now this is the factory stuff. I didn't install any Sonex parts in here. They're still sitting over there in their baggies. I want to get a baseline to see where I'm at previously before we do any Sonex parts, so that I can diagnostically determine if this valve body was the source of any drivability issues, or anything that we may have observed in the transmission. I don't think so. I think it's probably going to be fine. The only applied element that looked real weird was the overdrive clutch. It was, stuff was flaking off of it, and I still don't know why that is, but it would have been burnt if there was problems in the valve body. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. I have my own template for recording results. So this front page is just the lower valve body, and then the second page is going to be our upper valve body, including the accumulator pistons. Alright, first is going to be our lubrication control valve. Now I may move the valve body all around just so I can get this thing oriented in the right way so I can test it. So this is the inboard circuit. You want to make sure it's fully covered. So before I even begin, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I want to see between 15 and 20 inches of lift on working valves. For a stock application, I'll tolerate as low as 13, but I really want to see 15. If I see anything real weak or less than that, then based on where it's at, I'm either going to have to replace it with a aftermarket oversized valve, or I'm going to have to go and purchase a valve body. And these valve bodies are not real prevalent in terms of remands. So anyway, we're going to cross our fingers, make sure, or hope for the best, I guess. And if we do have weakness somewhere, hopefully is in either the main pressure regulator valve, which there's aftermarket options for, or the solenoid regulator valve, which again, there's oversized valves available. Alright, so this is telling me 25 inches of lift, or 24 and a half rather. And that is the inboard side of the lubrication control valve. This is the outboard location. Okay, that's 14, that's fine. And you can test the bore plugs as well. Sometimes it's hit and miss for whatever reason. So I'll see if I can get a reading on them. Okay, I'm not going to bother. Alright, next is going to be our converter regulator release valve, or release regulator valve rather. And so this is where they have you test for inverted, here and here. Let me double check. So that's where they have you test. I'm not getting anything. I'm not sure why. Alright, now what I'm doing is I'm pushing the bore plug inboard, and I'm getting 14 inches of lift. Let's try that again. Okay, not sure what's going on there. Alright, so that's giving me, looks like 12 and a half. And that's at this location right here. This is not giving me anything. Just want to see if there's anything on the underside of the casting that I need to plug. Not sure. We'll come back to that after we're done the rest of these. So here's our main pressure regulator valve. We'll test inboard, and then it has you test 2 locations outboard. Actually 3. One here, one here, one here. Now that's giving me 9. Bring up the location. So 1, 2, 3, and then here where they have you zoom in on the bottom, you know, kind of cut out, 4. Okay, that's giving me 5 or 6. Yep, 6. So that's 10. 9 3/4. And in the outboardmost location right here, let's see what that's giving me. And that's giving me 13 and a half. Okay, so now we have our bypass clutch control valve. So this is where they have you test it. Here. So that's giving me 20. I got a spot mark here as well. And that's giving me 13 and a half. So here is going to be our overdrive clutch latch valve. There's a spot to test here. That's 22. Alright, and then we have our overdrive clutch regulator valve. So E-clutch, in other words. That's 20. And then the outboard side. And that looks like 15 and a half. Alright, now we have our forward clutch or A-clutch valve train. So we have our inboard for our A-clutch pressure regulator valve, outboard location for same, and then we have an inboard and an outboard location for the boost valve and sleeve. Looks like we're sitting at 18 and a half. And it's dropping back down to 13. Now do one more time. And 14 down to 13. Interesting. So boost. Actually, let me double check. It might actually be that other location. Yeah, it's this location here. And that's giving me 10 and a half. And then the outboard sleeve is going to be here. And that's 16. Alright, so that's the main pressure regulator valve side. Now we'll go to the variable force solenoid side. Alright, so the clutch A or forward clutch latch valve is here. They don't actually give you any locations to test for this. So I'm just going to throw this in areas where maybe it looks like it could be tested and see if I get anything. Nope. I mean, Sonic's instructions have nothing for this valve. So this is going to be the V clutch latch valve or the direct clutch. And that's going to give us 14 and a half. Solenoid regulator valve is next. So that's going to be here. This spot is blank. So 14. Let's double check the instructions. Here's the solenoid valve, and that's where you have you test it. And then it also has you test the end plugs. You can do that if you want. This is giving me 13 and a half. Alright, next is going to be your D1 clutch brake latch valve. And that just has a bore plug to test. And that's 9 and a half. So they're pointing in this area here for the latch valve, but they didn't highlight it, so. Here's the circuit, and as you can see, it's fairly large. You would need a plate to cover this. And you have another circuit here that goes all the way up. Do a spot right here. Let's see if anything generates. I don't know if this is going to produce anything. Like I said, Sonics is not calling for testing here. It actually is. What I'm doing, it's giving me 14 inches. What I'm doing is plugging this here. Hey, this plug. And I'm going to record that there. Alright, so next is going to be drive enable. That's going to be right here. That's going to be 22 and a half. And you can test the bore plug. Give me 10. And then for the solenoid multiplex valve, that's also giving me a reading of 10 for the bore plug. Here's the test location for the valve itself. So solenoid multiplex valve. And it looks like 22 and a half. Okay. So I'm gonna need a new left-hand glove. PR valve's a little bit weak. Concerns me a little bit. So we're gonna have to see what our options are in the aftermarket. In the next segment I'll cover this, but offhand I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do just yet. So let me go ahead and remove this converter valve, and then we can flip it so it's in the correct orientation and put the factory bore plug in, and then test the inboard side. Let me go get another glove and then we'll be right back. Alright, got my glove on. So we're going to go ahead and yank out
yank out the converter regulator release valve or release regulator valve. Alright, just keep your, something over the bore. Okay, there's not much spring tension. Alright, let's fire up the machine and test this location here and see what we got. Alright, looks like 22 even. So 22 even down there. So here are the results. I didn't test some of the bore plugs. Doesn't really matter, we're replacing them anyway with O-ring versions, but as you can see, the valve body for the most part is healthy. There's a couple areas of weakness in bore plugs, but my main area of concern is going to be our main pressure regulator valve. And we have 9, 6, 10, 13 and a half. So going to be looking to see what is available to remediate this situation here. If we have to bore this thing out and install a oversized valve, then so be it. That's what we'll do. But the other area, I should say circuit, that is sometimes weak is going to be the solenoid regulator valve. That's coming in at 14. I'm fine with that. That's not going to be a problem for a stock application. If this was like high performance, then we would be a lot more strict in terms of our standards. But that's fine. These two valves right here, these bore plugs for the A clutch boost and PR valve and the E clutch regulator valves, the bore plugs themselves are a pain to get out. As you can see, I mangled a couple of them trying to just wedge them out with pliers. So anyway, let me go ahead and bring the lower valve body over here. We'll test the 4 valve trains there, and then we'll wrap up testing and go back to the bench and continue on. Okay, I only have 4 more valve trains to test, at least in this segment. Once we have the whole assembly back together, we will test the accumulators separately, and they get tested through ports on this side of the casting. Okay, so let's go over everything. We have our C clutch regulator valve, so that's going to be your intermediate clutch. Then you have your D clutch pressure regulator valve, and then you're going to have your D clutch latch valve, and you're going to have your B clutch, and that is going to be your B clutch regulator valve. So same deal, looking for 15 to 20 inches. We have the ports with a T marked where we're going to put our tester, and that's it. So for C clutch is going to be here. So it looks like 21. Alright, you could also test the bore plugs. I mean, like I said, this is more of an academic exercise. Sometimes I'll get a reading, sometimes I won't. I don't want to waste too much time on it. Yeah, I'm not getting anything. Probably because I'm not doing it right. It's that simple. Okay, your D1 regulator valve. It's like 24. Then this is going to be the inboard. Looks like that's, we're going to call that 20. Right there. For your D1 latch, it's going to be right here. It's like 22. I'm sorry, I said D1, that's the D2 latch. My apologies. D2. And then for your B regulator valve, B clutch, I'm going to stick it right there. So B clutch is going to be your direct clutch. 19. Alright, so overall the lower valve body should be healthy, at least for the working valves, 21, 24, 20, 22, and 19 for these locations respectively. So like I said, we'll test the accumulator valves once we have the assembly back together, but before we put the lead frame on it. So overall, the entire valve body, meaning both castings as far as working valves, is reasonably healthy. Reasonably healthy. The one area of concern, which is common, is the pressure regulator valve. Now, if if you have any time on ZF transmissions at all, the pressure regulator valves and those things wear like something awful. ZF5s, ZF6s, I mean, I haven't done any 8s or 10s, but the ones that I've done, the 5s and the 6 speeds, the pressure regulator valves are like, you just build it into the cost to replace them because they're almost always worn out, like 95% of the time. They're just heavily scored up, all kind of erratic line pressure issues if you were to do a line pressure test. Especially when they cross the 150,000 mile threshold, I mean, they just look beat to hell. So Transgo makes a valve that's drop-in for those valve bodies, and how it works is you have to stick it in the freezer overnight. It has scarf cut sealing rings on. You put those on, and that seals off that tire bore, all the circuitry in there completely. The reason you have to freeze it is because I guess it's ever so slightly oversized and it'll be difficult getting in. But I don't know if something like that's available for one of these or not. But we're gonna have to figure out something because I'm not comfortable with the readings I'm getting on the upper valve body for the PR valve and this valve body. So anyway, that's valve body testing. Let's go back to the bench, and I'll go over solenoids. It's important that you understand some couple key concepts and I guess principles when it comes to the solenoids in these transmissions. So we'll cover that.